Hello there folks, how you doing? It's been a wee while, I've been busy. I'm throwing some gear on the bicycle here. I'm thinking about a wee trip next week and I'm planning on taking you along with me. So I'm thinking carefully about what I need for this trip. I want to keep the weight down to the minimum. I'm not too worried about bulk, but I don't want to be carrying too much weight. So the bike might look quite heavy, but in fact it's mostly bulk. Although I'm standing here having a wee bit of a rethink on one or two items of gear. Mostly my thermal layer. I do have a thermal layer that is also waterproof, or reasonably waterproof. And if I chose to take that, I could lose some of the bulk from here and then maybe get this bag here sitting down a little bit lower, actually sitting on the rack itself. So let me explain what I've got here. Well, basically on this side I've got my sleep system. So that is a fairly heavy winter sleeping bag, a sleeping mat and a really small pillow, one of these Sea to Summit inflatable pillows. And that, apart from a spare inner tube, is all that is in that bag. So that bag is not particularly heavy, but it is quite bulky. So that's my sleep system. In this side here I've got one or two tools and I've got my cook system, which is very much stripped down. I've got some gas and a pocket rocket stove and I've got dehydrated food, and that's pretty much all that is in that bag there. So this bag actually will go down as the trip progresses because I'll be eating the food, and also the weight of the gas will reduce as I'm burning it. Strapped over the top of these two panniers I have my boat. I've got my Packraft complete with the wee sack that I used for inflating it, and a 4-piece double-bladed paddle, kayak type paddle in here. So this is the heaviest part. I'm not too worried about that because when I'm using the boat, this weight doesn't actually factor in. Well, the weight of the boat doesn't. The weight of the paddle is still going to be carried by the boat, but you get the picture. What I'm trying to do is to keep the weight down so I don't sink the ship. So I'm planning, as you can probably imagine by now, a trip that involves the bike and the boat. And up front I've got my tiny little solo tent, my Terra Nova Southern Cross 1 on the fork there, and then on the other side I've got my PFD, I've got my life preserver on that side. And that's about it. I'll put my little bag on the front, that little cheap bag that I've got. It'll sit on the front there, and that's where I keep my toiletries and one or two bits and pieces, and I'll also put my GPS in there if I need to navigate any particular part of the route. And I've got a wee toolkit tucked under the seat. So that's about it. I need to put some water bottles on the cages here, probably one water bottle and one flask, so that I can have my usual cup of coffee part way through a day. So it's a relatively straightforward trip, but it should be a wee bit of an adventure, especially at this time of the year. It's early February, and the reason that I haven't been very active on the channel is simply because I've been busy. But I also have some thoughts on the channel, and I'm not going to share them with you today, but I will have a wee chat during this upcoming adventure, which I'm planning for the early part of next week. I'm not 100% sure it's going to go ahead, by the way, because it's very much weather dependent, because I'm going to be on the water. Just now the long range forecast is looking pretty good, but there is a degree of uncertainty to it. So I'm hoping to get away. So I'm hoping that all this packing is not in vain, although it's always good fun planning for a trip and putting the gear together. But it's a bit of an anticlimax if you have to unpack it all and put it away without actually doing the trip. So let's keep our fingers crossed that it all goes to plan. So what else have I been up to? Well, in January I had a problem with the car, and if you watched the hot tent camping, the TP and Woodstove camp that Mo and I did around the turn of the year there, you'll be familiar with the problem that I alluded to during that camp where I was a little bit worried if the car was going to start in the early morning after several freezing nights. The glow plugs were needing replaced. I delayed putting the car in for repair because it was also due an MOT and a service, so I just delayed it for a couple of weeks and got the whole lot done in a oneer. But that meant that I was a little bit reluctant to stray too far from home with the car during that cold weather. So I was out and about quite a lot, in fact, and did some local hills and a lot of coastal walking. I just didn't take the camera with me. Then I had some other personal admin to sort out. I have been in the process of applying for a visa because I'd like to go back out to the Far East later this year. And that meant that I had to submit my passport and go for interview, and also be available for a follow-up interview if that was deemed necessary, which fortunately it wasn't. But I didn't want to stray too far from home again during that process, so that's all done and dusted. During that time I was busy in the gear room, and what I might do is just grab a hold of the camera, and you've probably seen plenty glimpses of it as I was filming loading up the bike here, but I'll talk you through some of the stuff that I was doing. So let me grab a hold of the camera. So the last time I filmed a bit of the gear room, with Mo's help, I showed you the bike storage solution. Well, since then I've put a base onto the bike rack, if I can call it that, and then underneath I've got these drip trays, and because I mostly put the bikes away fairly clean, I've got plenty storage here for nuts and bolts and screws and what have you. So that wasn't a particularly big job, but it took a wee bit of time to go and source the wood and get it sorted. But I wanted to build a shelf above the garage door, and I mentioned that in one of my previous videos. Well, that's it done. It's for storing all the cushions and carpets that come out of the van. We don't use any of that soft furnishings, if I can use that term, from the van, but if I ever sell the van I'm going to need them all, so I needed a place to store it. And so I've got this kind of bridge type shelf that bridges the garage door, so it's above all the mechanism for the garage door. I had to work out whether it was going to be worth it, because you can see that the shelf itself is a wee bit above the runners, but the door protrudes above the runners when I'm opening and closing it, so there's an arc, and I had to work out what the arc was and make sure that the supports for the shelf didn't foul with the door, which I'm glad to say worked quite well. And then to support that shelf I put in these wee benches here, a small one on that side with a 90mm gap between another one on this side, and then some storage solutions. A wee bit dark in that corner. I need a wee angle poise lamp on this bench here. So that's mostly bits for bicycles there. It's all the small things like spare inners for valves and dust caps and tyre levers and 4, 5 and 6 bolts and clamps and various bits and pieces. So I haven't got around to filling it all up yet, but I've got boxes of bike parts that need to be put away in a place where I can find them. And on this side I've got all the oils and solvents in a little tray there, and I don't think I'm going to put any shelves on this, so just now it's a bit decorative. So and then away at the top in that corner I've still got space, so I've got a storage solution there for bigger nuts and bolts and things away up there. I'm not sure how well you can make that out, but what I did, I put wheels onto the bench. I think I mentioned that the last time as well, so I can actually move that bench left and right now quite easily. And in that far corner round there I'm going to have some storage boxes that will go quite high up, almost up to the roof level there, up to the ceiling. So I've been busy with that, And I've also been in the woods with my chainsaw. I got permission to harvest a bit of windblow, a bit of ash. So I was messing about and I made this bushcraft paddle one day where I was waiting on some deliveries and I couldn't get out and about, so I put this time to good use. I'm not sure if it's very good use or not, but I made an ash paddle out of one piece of wood, so basically just with an axe and some sandpaper. So there's no finesse, and you can see that there's a set of bike wheels down there. So on my old, I don't know what I would call that, lightweight touring bike, the Ridgeback that you can see there next to my Surly, I changed the wheels on that, and the gears were pretty mashed on it, so I actually managed to take them to bits and put them all back together again. I had to replace a couple of wee bits, but it's running not quite like a new bike now, but it's running very smoothly. And then I've also been building up this Surly, which you'll see a lot more of on the channel once I get a little bit further on with the build. I've not got any luggage carrying system on it yet, so I'm contemplating either going for bike packing or going for lighter weight racks. Actually, maybe not lightweight racks. I might go for Surly racks on it and gravel bags, something like that. So relatively low volume, so still making this a backcountry bike for sort of fast and light travel, rather than the fat bike that we see here, which is usually pretty well laden. You'll also notice that the fat bike is different. I don't know, I think I mentioned this in the last video as well, that I broke the frame on my old Genesis Caribou, and Genesis very kindly gave me some compensation, which I was able to use to purchase this Generation 1 Caribou fat bike, and I've made quite a few modifications to it, and I've got it built up. Actually, it's a better bike than the one that it replaced, to be honest. And I was able to do it on a fairly tight budget. Got a nice rack on the back. It's fat bike specific rack made by Blackburn, and I like the way that the luggage and everything sits quite far out. So it's not a slim bike by any means, but it's got good carrying capacity, and I've got a Surly tyre, a really aggressive tyre on the back. I didn't put such an aggressive tyre on the front, so you'll see a bit more of this bike next week if the weather is kind to us. So that's what I've been up to, folks, for the last 2 or 3 weeks, but I think the time is right to get out and about and enjoy a wee adventure together. So stay tuned. A wee movie coming to a screen near you at some time in the not too distant future. Thanks as ever for tuning in. Bye for now, folks.